So why do people keep buying this? This is the Turtle Beach Velocity 1 flight deck, and it's been out for a few months, and Turtle Beach sent this review copy to me. And as always, everything said in this review going forward are my own words. We're going to look closely at it, go over the features, and what makes this a little bit different, then look at the build quality and give you my thoughts on the value, if there is any, and talk about who this type of HOTAS might suit, because it's not for everyone. First off, it comes in at around $370 US at the time of making this video. Keep that in mind, because that's the baseline for the review. Now, that's not what I would consider budget in terms of where peripherals can go and price-wise. It's not what I would call top tier or expensive either. So for that $370 US, you do actually get a ton of features. And this is where we're going to start. Firstly, it comes with both the throttle and the stick, which is basically everything you need to get flying. As far as the throttle goes, it's got a small It's got a small touchscreen display. It's semi-useful, and we'll get into that later, but I'll also add that it's a little bit reflective and the colours do wash out when viewed on an angle. It's still very usable though. The throttle itself uses a Hall effect sensor, meaning there are no contact points, and it uses magnets to determine its position. This is a very accurate way to do it, and it leads to a longer life product at the same time. But it's nothing new, lots of devices use this. One neat feature is the haptic detents that you can adjust via the touchscreen. I love the idea of this. It works quite well, but it falls short in the sense that, I think it's more of a vibration effect than what I would call haptic. It's just a little bit muddy feeling. The actual movement of the throttle though is stunning. It's smooth, accurate, and a little bit weighty. And I'm a massive fan of this. It's got a few clicky buttons, a couple of hat switches, a rotary dial, a little flap lever with detents at both ends. Look, this full HOTAS unit is just covered with buttons, switches, and dials. It's got this cool fire button, which I like to use as a chaff flare in DCS. You can easily split the throttle if you want to try some Top Gun maneuvers, just using this button on the side. And we can't move on until I highlight the touch display. There's a variety of things here like lighting, firmware updates, and profiles for multiple planes. But more on this when we cover the software. The screen itself is super sharp, but it is a little bit laggy at times. However, super useful, and I think it's a great addition. Now for the stick. The base has a gear lever, which is well implemented. It's got a nice click at either end. There's a handy 3-position rotary switch on the other side. A few standard sort of keys. A nice set of switches in the bottom left. However, 2 of them were a little bit loose. Only the center 2-way switch was the one that was solid. So let me know in the comments if you've had this issue, as I heard it's common in a few. Other than that, the stick has everything you'd expect from a kind of combat style HOTAS, like a brake lever, missile release, hat switches, trim wheel, which I absolutely love. And you can even adjust the length of the grip, which I really appreciate. All you have to actually do is push this button in here, and you can see it. I've got it extended at the moment, but if I push that in and push the grip down, and it's not like a massive amount of adjustment, but you really don't need much to make a difference in terms of the different hand sizes there. The ergonomics of the stick are also great. There is a mouse mode just by clicking this orange button here. It's a neat idea, but maybe lacking a little bit in implementation. It's not the smoothest. Maybe this will improve with time and software updates, as it has got real potential. The trigger is nice and smooth, albeit a little bit short in travel. The rest of the buttons and switches, they're good. Just what you'd expect for something priced at this sort of level. This whole thing is just rotary dial and switch heaven. It's covered in them, which makes it super useful for flight sims. Maybe even the space guys will love it too. With all of these features, does the build quality match up? Well, it really does excel in most areas and some not. So let's go through it. As far as materials, weight, finish, the way it looks, even in close detail, Turtle Beach have done a fantastic job. I am super impressed with the build quality. That high quality matte plastic finish, the soft plastic finish on the actual stick. All the rotary knobs are brilliant. It's really punching above its weight in terms of finish. It really is. The only area I was disappointed with were those two loose switches on the front. But I mean, it's nothing that a little bit of super glue shouldn't be able to sort out. Now for the important part, flying with it. So the throttle. So I really enjoy the throttle. It's smooth, it's precise, there's no play. All the buttons and dials and switches seem to be right for, my size of hands. The touch display just here, look, it does lag, but at the same time, I find it very useful inside the sim. It's maybe unusable in VR, but for traditional gaming, it's great. I think there's a nice amount of throw in the throttle, which makes it easy to be accurate. All in, there's lots to love about the throttle. Now, using the stick is much the same, but there's some stuff that we need to chat about here. There's a fairly large detent across the middle of the X and the Y axis. It's important to note that most low-end and mid-tier flight sticks will actually have this. But for a HOTAS at this price point, I was hoping for the detent to be a little more muted. It does feel much like the Velocity 1 flight stick that I reviewed a while back. There's a link in the description to that one. Continuing with the stick feel, maybe just a lighter spring would have helped, as you can see how quickly this likes to snap back into place. But that is very personal though, and everyone will feel different about it. I just felt like there was a smidge more refinement needed. The stick also has yaw and rudder control for those without rudders. It's got a nice amount of twist for this, and as far as I can tell, it works quite well. And this can also be switched off if you already have a set of rudders. Now, one thing to note is that it's switched off digitally in the software, and the actual stick will still rotate, but that just won't transfer into the sim. Before we move on to the good and the bad points, let's go over the software. Now, initially, I had some issues updating the firmware. The base and the stick failed to fully light up and switch on, essentially. But to Turtle Beach's credit, I found some pretty clear instructions on the website directing me into the bootloader mode, and that quickly fixed the issue. Once I got that sorted out, jumping into the software, it's quite well set out, although anyone new to flight simulation may quickly get overwhelmed. My advice here for anyone new is just to take your time to get a good understanding of everything you can do in here. There's so much adjustment from deflection haptics to sensitivity of scroll wheels, and the best thing is you can save out your different profiles for different planes or sims. One thing I did find a little bit weird though is that the profiles are created separately. For, you got the profile for the throttle and the profile from the stick. So if you want to switch those profiles, you have to load each one in individually. Now, shout me out if I've got this wrong. That was just my experience when I was using the sim. Maybe I'm wrong about that because it does seem a little bit odd. But overall, I'm a fan of the software. And by far the most useful thing is the customization of the touch display with your own buttons. This is an absolute masterstroke. Now, it is important to understand you're unable to configure states into these buttons, or at least I couldn't figure out a way to do it. So at the moment, you're limited to simple keyboard shortcut or button presses. So now for the good and the not so good. Like every other time, we're going to start off with the good stuff. The build quality is excellent. It really is. Apart from those switches on the back that I mentioned previously. Ergonomically, it feels really well designed. It's feature rich from the adjustable stick length to the touch display and so much more. All the rotary dials are an absolute joy to use. The throttle, you know, it is smooth and weighty. Both bases have got a little bit of heft to them, so they mostly stay put. Each come with their own mounting holes. You can see there's three mounting holes on the bottom there. And you can change the back colours or the backlighting on the base. I think that's essential, especially for some people my age who don't appreciate all the kind of whiz-bang bright colours that you might get. The software integration is deep, and it gives you control over really quite a lot. And finally, one of the best things about this is you can customize your buttons on the touch display. So it's a mini button box in a sense. And for the not so good. So those switches on the back feel like a little bit of a mess, you know, but nothing that a little bit of super glue won't fix. And this could be a one-off for me, so please shout out in the comments if this is your experience with these set of switches. The detent on the stick is more than I would have liked. Again, that's very personal. It doesn't really translate too much into when you're using the sim, you know, it didn't bother me that much. But again, for something this price, I just want a little bit of a smoother transition from left to right and back to front. I'm going to say that left to right, or that axis for instance, has got a harsher detent than back and front. And there is actually just one thing about the base, and it's the touchscreen can be a little bit laggy. So final thoughts on this HOTAS. Turtle Beach, I think, have created a great product here. Overall, I can't look past the sheer number of features, buttons, dials, and switches available. Along with the software package, this makes for a highly configurable HOTAS. There's enough here for you to comfortably fly just about anything. The throttle is butter smooth with a nice weight to it. And although the stick has got that little bit of a detent, it doesn't take away much from the flying experience, even from someone who's spent a lot of time in a sim with some high-end sticks. But in saying this HOTAS is not for everyone. Anyone moving up from a budget HOTAS will fall in love with the build quality and the sheer adaptability of this. But for those people that place a smoother detent stick as a high priority, then this simply just isn't for you. In line with that, if you're after something in that realm, you will have to fork out more money anyway, and you'll lose some of the unique features along the way. If you're okay with a slightly stronger spring tension and the detent through the middle of the axis, which is pretty comparable to the Velocity 1 stick, then everything else about this HOTAS is impressive. It does sit well in a price bracket as far as I'm concerned, just below the high-end stuff and just above the budget options. And for what it gives you, I do think the price is fair. There's a very large jump in build quality when comparing to the more budget options, and I say again because I think it's important. This is an all-in-one solution that can do a lot. If you love to customize, need a large amount of inputs, and fly a variety of flight and space sims, then this stick is a no-brainer. If you're set on having a softer feel through the axis of the flight stick itself, then be prepared to lose a few features and part with a bit more cash, as I'd advise looking at something a little bit higher end.